Right, I had a plan, I want to follow on from what Russell was doing and what Craig said about toenails. If you imagine this as the pad of your toe, yeah? You're walking on it. The toenail on top provides a platform to equalize the distribution of the force throughout the whole pad of the toe. The other thing that happens with your toenail is, especially at a time if you're not wearing shoes, back in the day, if you're walking like this, yeah? If I'm walking like this, my toe's close to the ground. I bring it forward, yeah? If there's any sticks, stones, twigs, whatever, it's going to catch the top of my toe, yeah? The top of my toe is going to be the most vulnerable point as I do that. So the toenail provides protection. I'm saying this in the context that, most people didn't think the toenail did anything. People didn't think Craig was, well, why is Craig saying toenail is a stupid thing? It's obvious toenails are really important. So as a group of people, there might be people, it might be you, that you think you're not doing anything. You're just an ugly toenail, yeah? What do I do, yeah? In the body of Christ, I am a wrinkly old toenail, right? Or in my family group, or in my peers, in my workplace, I'm useless, right? Or you might think of some other people as they're not contributing very much. Just because you don't understand something doesn't mean it doesn't exist, yeah? There is a philosophical concept that familiarity is not comprehension. We are familiar with something and we can believe we understand it because we're familiar with it. But often we don't. So we're familiar with toenails, but we don't necessarily understand what they do, yeah? And it's the same with any group you're part of. You may be familiar with that group, and you may think you know what it's doing, but as soon as you're convinced you know what's happening, you're wrong, because the fundamental truth is it's too complicated for us to understand everything. And as soon as you think you've got control, you've lost the plot. Okay, I'll go on another example. So, sorry slides, guys. I'll come back to the slides at some point. Right, okay. We've heard the phrase hand-eye coordination, yeah? So here I am. Toss it up and catch it, yeah? Okay. Right. I'm tossing this up and down. I'm catching it. We talk about hand-eye coordination. Many of us have thrown something up and caught it, yeah? Catch it, right? We think we're moving our hands. We rarely think that we're moving our elbows, yeah? But my elbows are moving, yeah? Duh, yeah? The elbows move. I'm making lots and lots of micro movements to keep my balance because my center of gravity shifts ever so slightly as I'm moving. The other thing is that our muscles are often at least in opposition, but sometimes there are multiple different directions pulling, so that if it's all just going like that, then I won't be able to do anything, yeah? So I need to have my hand, for that to go, there's the muscles pulling my hand in, but there's the muscles pulling the hand out. Now, if we use the example of the church, we've been talking about welcoming, but we also have a safeguarding policy, yeah? So we want to welcome people in, but there have been 2 occasions that I've been quite deeply involved in where people from the church have ended up being locked up. One for criminal justice reasons, one for mental health reasons, for the safety of themselves and the safety of the people around them. So you need to welcome people, but we need to keep people safe. And there are many of these things in life where there are multiple things going on, multiple muscles working, if you like, and we need to get them all in balance to catch the ball. The other thing that's happening when I'm doing this is I'm expelling energy, yeah? I can do that because I'm breathing in and breathing out. I'm guessing everyone here is breathing in and breathing out, yeah? And we're not always aware of it. We take it for granted. We don't notice that the breath rate speeds up, speeds down, unless we suddenly go, oh, I'm knackered, or unless we've got a health problem. And then you become very aware. The other thing is, for the energy to do this, I had breakfast this morning. I had food yesterday. And this digestive system between here and here is breaking all that food down and absorbing the energy so that I can do things. And as I do stuff, then there's wear and tear, and there's a waste products generated, and these waste products have to be expelled. You know, we pee, we poo, we fart, we sweat. We do all these things that we don't necessarily like to talk about or think about, but they're necessary for our lives. And again, if your digestive system breaks, it's really, you're not going to be able to, speaking sadly from personal experience, when your digestive system breaks, it's bad. But we don't like talking about it, right? So again, the things that we don't like, the people we don't like talking about, the people we don't like associating with, might be actually vital for us. And we don't realize that they're vital for us until something goes wrong. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a few slides, a few bits of Bible reading, quite a few bits of Bible reading. And there are a number of ways you can listen to this, and it'll all be on the screen. One is you can think, oh, there's a lot of detail. And it's one thing for me to say there's a lot of detail. There's another thing to say, oh, there's a lot of detail. And I think that's important because throughout life there are people who are going to try and oversimplify, who are going to say, oh, you just do these three things and it'll all be okay, right? And I want just to say, nah, it's complicated. But in another way, it's simple. We'll get to that. Or there might be little bits that I'll put out, and that one of these little bits will be dead relevant to you, right? So, hit the slides. I need to put my reading glasses on. So, we're going to talk about living as a body of people. Now, this is relevant, I think, for us as people in shops. We're part of a group of people wandering around the aisles of the supermarket. We're part of a group of people as we're on the road, as pedestrians, as drivers, as cyclists, whatever. Or as a nation of citizens and voters, and the governments make policy, families. We're all multiple different bodies we're part of. Next. Have the next slide? Yeah. So these are my thoughts and questions as of May 2026. My understanding in April 2026 was a bit different. And my understanding, maybe afterwards you'll come and speak to me and I'll go, oh, I hadn't thought about that, right? So learning is not, none of us have perfect knowledge. And we're all moving at a different pace and all got different skill sets. Next. So I'm going to look at a group of people as a body, look at some Paul's key points, and then tell a tale. Next. So Paul's key points is, it's about interdependence, not independence. That life together is complicated, the important might not be attractive. Don't dismiss people just because they're different. And don't think of yourself as useless and powerless. Next. So, 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 12 to 27. Right. Christ is like a single body which has many parts. It's still one body, even though it's made up of different parts. In the same way, all of us, whether Jews or Gentiles, whether slaves or free, have been baptized into the one body by the same Spirit. And we've all been given the one Spirit to drink. For the body itself is not made up of only one part, but of many parts. If the foot were to say, because I'm not a hand, I don't belong to the body, that wouldn't keep it from being part of the body, duh. And if the ear was to say, because I'm not an eye, I don't belong to the body, that wouldn't keep it from being part of the body. If the whole body was just an eye, how could it hear? And if it was only an ear, how could it smell? as it was, God put every different part in the body just as he wanted it to be. There wouldn't be a body if it was only one part. As it is, there are many parts but one body. So then, the eye cannot say to the hand, I don't need you, nor can the head say to the feet, I don't need you. On the contrary, we cannot do without the parts of the body that seem to be weaker. And those parts of the body that we think aren't worth very much are the ones that we treat with greater care. While the parts of the body which don't look very nice are treated with special modesty, which the more beautiful parts don't need. God himself has put the body together in such a way as to give greater honor to those parts that need it. And so, there is no division in the body, but all its different parts have the same concern for one another. If one part of the body suffers, all the other parts suffer with it. If one part is praised, all the other parts share its happiness. All of you are Christ's body, and each one is part of it. Okay, thank you. Next. So again, don't dismiss people just because they're different. And don't think of yourself as unimportant. We should not just value our diversity is necessary. And don't let attractiveness or ugliness blind you. Okay, next. Okay, I've already done that, so go to the next one. Right, and next one. Okay, so I just had a wee pause there because I've jabbered on, and you might want a wee pause just to think about all that I've said. Okay. And again. Next. Right, so when Paul talks about us being different parts of the body, what sort of things is he talking about? Now, what I've got here is a whole lot of verses, and we're running low on time, so I won't read all the verses, but can we just scan them through in the screen so you know they're there, right? So I just keep going. So 1 Corinthians, and just keep going, and 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 again. Right, okay, so summarize that. All that Paul said, and you can look, I encourage you to look it up, is that the parts of the body, in 3 of his letters that he said, the parts of the body he lists are people with wisdom, people with knowledge, with faith, the power to heal, the power to work miracles. Next. Speaking God's message, the ability to tell the difference between gifts that come from the Spirit and those that don't, the ability to speak in strange tongues, the ability to explain what's said. Apostles, prophets, teachers, serving people, encouraging others, sharing with others, having authority, showing kindness, sincere love, hating what's evil and at the same time holding on to what's good, showing respect for one another. Share your belongings with your needy fellow Christians. Open your homes to strangers. Bless those who persecute you. Be happy with those who are happy. Weep with those who weep. Have the same concern for everyone. Evangelists, pastors, and don't be proud but accept humble duties. Be prepared to do the stuff that nobody wants to do. That's just part of it. Right? Some people try to hide either they want to hide the complexity or they want to hide from the complexity of us by putting us into a small number of boxes. Right? They try to control and constrain the complexity of life by putting us in wee boxes. I've had that a lot in management. When I was in the corporate world, there are 5 main types of people. If you're building a team, you need to have these 5 types of people, and there's tests to put you into one of these 5 boxes. Or it's usually 5, 6, or 7. If it's only 3 boxes, then people think that's too simplistic. If it's more than 7, then people think that's too complicated and not doing it. So there's a sweet spot between 5 and 7, and there's a lot of money being made in this. And the one that's happening in the church at the moment is what's called the 5-fold ministries. So they've taken Ephesians chapter 4, verse 11, where it says there are 5 things to build up the church, and ignore everything else that Paul says, and try to fit us all into these 5 little boxes. And there's tests they can do to find out, are you an apostle or are you a teacher? And everything we do, they try and fit into one of these wee boxes. And it's, to me, it feels a bit culty, and it feels a bit of a con, and it feels a really good way to get money. And it's a narrowing of the mind and a hiding from the richness and the messiness of the body of life that we live in. Okay, next one. All of us affect the people around us. We just do. We can all make the world a bit better, or we can all make the world a bit worse. We're all interconnected. We're all interdependent, you know. And a lot of the effects that we have on people, we don't recognize. We don't realize we're doing it, for good or ill. I've had people come up and say, oh, yeah, I remember you did this, Douglas. I have no idea what it was, but it made a big difference in their life. Hopefully they're telling me about the good stuff, yeah? Right, wee word on leadership. Leadership is showing, right? Control and coordination and leadership are three different things. We are coordinated to be here at the start at 10:30 when the service starts, but leadership is showing. You know, it's one thing to say, Hillary's not here for me to have a go at her. But it's one thing to say that you must stick to 20 minutes when you're preaching, and then when you preach, you take 25 minutes. Yeah. Then the next person that Hillary says, oh, you are here. I saw you were next to Andrew. Yeah. Okay. Good. I'm glad you're here, Hillary, because that's a lot better, right? So leadership is showing. Next slide, please. So, this is just before the Last Supper. Jesus washed the disciples' feet, and there was a big fuss. And after Jesus had washed their feet, he put his outer garment back on and returned to his place at the table. Do you understand what I've just done to you, he asked. You call me teacher and Lord, and it's right that you do so, because that's what I am. I, your Lord and teacher, have just washed your feet. You then should wash one another's feet. I have set an example for you so that you will do just what I've done for you. And then, later on, he says, now I give you a new commandment. Love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. If you have love for one another, then everyone will know that you're my disciples. Okay, next one. All right, finally, a quick tale. Starting with Acts chapter 2, 24 to 47. Jesus has come back from the dead, gone up to heaven. The apostles have preached, big massive crowds convert. And then go on, it talks about their life together. So they're all spend their time learning from the apostles, taking part in the fellowship, and sharing in the fellowship meals and the prayers. Next slide, please. Just quickly go through this. Right. All the believers continued together in close fellowship and shared their belongings with one another. They would sell their property and possessions and distribute the money among all according to what each one needed. Okay, next. And then next again. If we fast forward a few weeks or a few months to Acts chapter 6, in those days the number of disciples was increasing. The Hellenistic Jews, that's Jews that don't speak Hebrew or Aramaic, probably immigrants. Probably they grew up in other Jewish communities and have moved to Jerusalem. They're complaining against the Hebraic Jews, that's those that speak Aramaic or Hebrew. They've probably lived in Judea for generations. So in those days, when the number of disciples was increasing, the Hellenistic Jews among them complained against the Hebraic Jews because their widows were being overlooked in the daily distribution of the food. So the 12 gathered all the disciples together and said, it would not be right for us to neglect the ministry of the word of God in order to wait on tables. Brothers and sisters, choose 7 men from among you who are known to be full of the Spirit and wisdom. We will turn this responsibility over to them and will give our attention to prayer and the ministry of the word. This proposal pleased the whole group. They chose Stephen, a man of faith in the Holy Spirit, also Philip, Prochorus, Nicanor, Timon, Parmenas, and Nicholas from Antioch, a convert to Judaism. Yeah. This story I find very, very striking. It does my head in. Yeah? Maybe that's why it's there. So, if we go to the next slide, right? So, we've got food is being distributed to anyone who has need, as it said earlier, as long as they're Hebrew. Yeah? We're not going to give the food to these needy immigrants. Yeah? Today, would we call that racism? We'd certainly call it discrimination on a protected characteristic, yeah? And what do the leaders do? Well, that's waiting on tables. That's not our responsibility, waiting on tables. We do the important stuff like preaching, as if preaching about racism and discrimination isn't something you should preach about. Yeah? They just dismiss it as waiting on tables. And what had Jesus just done to them a few months, just before he died? He'd washed their feet. Yeah? One of the themes throughout the New Testament is the struggle between welcoming everyone and being racist and bigoted. You see that time, it comes back to that theme again and again and again. Except the translators don't call it racism and bigotry, they call it Gentiles. And they dress it up in a way that we can avoid facing the consequences today. But it's about racism and bigotry, about discriminating people according to, are they real Jews? They're not real Jews, so they're not really, they can't really be saved because they're not really Jews. Now, what seems to happen is that for the rest of Acts, or for the next two and a bit chapters of Acts, the apostles hardly appear. They only appear to go and check up on what these guys are doing, yeah? But what seems to happen is that God keeps working in the church, but he's working with the people who are loving and who are prepared to speak to the people that they come across, regardless of who they are. That ends up with one of them getting killed. Stephen gets killed for that. And then Philip is taken and to stand next to a chariot, and he sees there's an Ethiopian eunuch inside. Now, back then, there were very strict laws about who wore what. So it would be really obvious to tell that's an Ethiopian eunuch. Yeah? Nowadays, not so much. But back then, they're called sumptuary laws, that certain people had to wear it. Now, an Ethiopian eunuch is double excluded from the body from the people of God. The first, he's Ethiopian, he's not Jewish. And secondly, he's a eunuch. There's a bit in the Bible that talks about men, women, eunuchs, and children. Yeah? Eunuchs are non-binary. As Jesus said, some of them are born that way, some of them are made that way. And some of them choose to become that way. And Philip's reaction is he's standing next to the guy, and Philip says, "Oh, would you like some help? You're reading something, you're struggling with it. Can I help you?" That's it. That's what it does. Philip standing there, sees a guy who's struggling, and says, "Can I help you?" And that leads to the church in Ethiopia. If you go on to Acts, when God speaks to Peter and says, "I want to speak to this Roman guy, Cornelius," it takes visions and commands, and Peter argues the toss until eventually he goes. And even then, the Ethiopian eunuch has to be baptized, and Philip says, "You want to be baptized? I'll baptize you." That's cool. Whereas for Peter to baptize Cornelius, there have to be all sorts of miracles happening to convince Peter that this is a good idea. Okay, next slide. So, summary. Interdependence, we depend on each other. Life together is complicated. The important might not be attractive. Don't dismiss people just because they're different. And remember, you're not powerless. And then the next slide is, and now I'm going to show you a more excellent way. Right? This is Paul, right? He does all this stuff about the body and all the different things. And this is, but I've told all that, but now I'm going to show you something even better, and it's love. If we have all these abilities and skills and whatever, and we don't love each other, we're just empty noisemakers that are just getting in people's way. If we mess up and do things badly, but we love each other, we can fix it. Love is the more excellent way. As Jesus said, I give you a new commandment, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. I think with the story of the Hellenistic widows, what it says to me is the apostles weren't loving these women. If they'd really loved these women, they'd have dealt with it. They weren't loving the people who were being bigoted. They got caught up in their sense of their felt obligation. We are the leaders. We need to be doing this. That the love had been squeezed out. Love one another. Next slide.